So thanks for all coming out tonight. We're gonna do things. This is gonna be good. And we're gonna start by talking about, we're gonna get into all this stuff about originality and reasoning from first principles and all of this. But I'm gonna kind of go through the story of how I even started to write about this in the first place, and then we'll get into the actual topic. So this all started, I think it was like March of 2015, maybe April, when I got a phone call. Oh, shit! What just happened? Okay, wait. That was so good. Okay, it worked. What the hell was that? The computer didn't like how cocky I got there, and he wanted to show me who was in charge. Okay, so I got a phone call. That's me. I had a photographer with me that night. It was a woman who said, hey Tim, this is time to get in the phone. I work with Elon Musk. He likes Wait But Why, and he was wondering if you're ever interested in writing about what the industry's involved in. So that was not the call you expect, and it's embarrassing. My head fell off, and so gathered myself, and eventually, we were able to plan out a time to get on the phone. So I'm now like in my pajama pants 2 days later, like pacing around my apartment, like on the phone and he, he doesn't help you because he's awkward also. So, you've seen him in interviews probably, and it's not different on the phone. And so I'm being like tremendously awkward, and it's not like he's this charismatic. He's like, so tell me. No, he's just being like, so what do you do? And I'm like, I don't know. So we finally gather ourselves, and we have a really good conversation, and about all the different things he's involved in, and he's just talking frankly about it. And he basically says that he would like more people to understand kind of in depth what he's doing, because it's all about the depth. If you understand in depth what he's doing with his companies, then you suddenly are on his page. You totally get why it's important. If you don't understand in depth, it's really easy to mistake what he's doing for frivolous or for overambitious or for kind of selfish or all these other motivations that once you understand it, you realize aren't there. And so, he wants people to get behind these missions because he really cares about them. So I think what he saw was a potential, a very long form blogger who was able to maybe, spend the time to really dig in to what he did. I think he read my post on artificial intelligence, and he was basically like, can you do that for these things? And I was like, yes, for you. Can we hang out? Can I shake your hand and take a picture and tell everyone that I know you? He's like, yeah, I don't care. I'm like, yes, everybody wins. So I went out to California, got to see the Tesla factory, which is just super cool. SpaceX factory, which is even cooler. And I was there and I kept being like, you also have the other factory and this factory. It was like crazy seeing both of them in back-to-back days, like the scope of this dude's ambition. So then just finally it's time to sit down with him. And we had an in-person, like old Western awkward off again. It was as awkward. It was as awkward as you can imagine. I was a disaster. The first 5 minutes was like, I have the whole thing recorded for quotes and stuff, and I cannot listen to it. At the beginning I was like, skip over that until we get to this thing, because I'm just, but we settled in again, and eventually, and we had what would turn into like a 2-hour, like really good conversation. It was just so cool getting to talk to him, because he's thinking about all this stuff. He's so smart. He's actually, we'd be talking about something like Mars, and after a while, I forget that, I just think I'm talking to like a really smart dude I know, and we're talking about Mars, and we're like, oh my God, people are going to go there, and he was like, yeah, I think we need to like send the first Dragon in 2018. I'm like, oh yeah, you're doing that. You're the actual guy who's gonna. That's like that rocket's yours that I'm looking at over there, and so very crazy. And I came out of that, and I was like, okay, I have access to this guy. Like, what can I do with it? And I said I want to do 2 things. First is the thing he wanted me to do, which. Obviously, I want to understand why he's doing what he's doing. What's going on with these companies? Why are they important? What's the deal with these industries? What's the deal with the future of all of these industries, et cetera? And The second thing that I wanted to do, that I don't think he cared about, but I wanted to understand why he's able to do this stuff. Like I was in these two factories back to back, and I'm like, I need to figure out what that dude's secret is. That no one I know can do anything at all, basically, and he can do both of these things. And on the side, he has Solar City, and he's like, oh yeah, that's like my Sunday night project, is like revolutionizing energy. So I was like, I need to study. It's like I feel like I had my hands on one of these like, Henry Ford guys, and I'm like, I need to like try to dig into his like inner psychology, then to talk. So I had a chance to talk to a ton of his executives. That was a key. I asked them what it was like working with him, what their opinion was. I watched a ton of interviews, and I got to have multiple conversations with him about this stuff. And I tried to kind of get to the bottom of what, and that's where I'm gonna go into that stuff mostly tonight. We'll go through the first part a little bit, and then I'm gonna explain like what I learned about why he can do this stuff. So yeah, the first part, I started with Tesla. And so before I tried to figure out the whole why can he do this stuff, I just tried to figure out what's going on with these companies. And to understand Tesla, so people who don't get Tesla, they're like, oh, it's a car company, it's an electric car company, and he's probably just trying to build the biggest car company and build it to be a $500 billion company. But there's so much more to that, to it than that. And especially now Tesla has bought Solar City. It's an energy company. But the first thing you need to do is just to understand why this matters is just take a huge step back, a big zoom out, and look at the history of everything before and the future in terms of energy. And so on one side, you have like the past where we didn't really use energy. Like in the year 1650, like no one knew how to do it. They would like push stuff with their arms, or like maybe they had a windmill or like some water wheel or something, but not much was going on with energy, right? We had no footprint of any kind. Then we discovered that there was this underground, sea of essentially stored sunlight, because sunlight goes into these old plants for 300 million years, and they die and they go under the surface, and 300 million years of dead plants builds up, each one of them having some of the sun's energy, and you end up with this sea of stored energy. It's like you can burn. So burning something, if you take a log, it's amazing when you look at a fireplace, like how much fire came out of that one log. Like you're just holding this log, and there's like a lot of stored chemical energy in it. So the burning is obviously like a great way to like release a huge amount of energy, and the Industrial Revolution taught us how to actually use it rather than just like stand around the fire. We used it to heat up water, which created jets of steam, which we could use to move trains and move ships and other things. But we didn't have enough wood to burn, so they discovered this sea of underground stuff, fossil fuels. It makes a lot of sense why everyone was very pumped about that, and why we started basically in the Industrial Revolution was built on this sea. We discovered this sea. We started creating all of this industry, all of this manufacturing, all of this transportation, all this other stuff. And then, of course, that stuff built a world where we needed a lot more stuff, and we kept having to do it. It's like a dog that discovers, it's like digging his bone for his, to put his bone into the woods, and then he discovers like a cave of pulled pork. Like, dogs, they're not going to be like, well, that's interesting, I'll have a little now, just come back to that later. No, the dog's going to eat until he dies. And the problem is, the humans aren't that different, and that's what we did, and we're kind of eating until we die. And so Elon sees it like that, and so he says, look, the only eventual situation has to be the sustainable energy era. Sometime when we're going to need more and more energy as technology gets radder and radder, which it is. And we obviously, regardless, have all the debate in the world about climate change. Not here to have that debate. The point is, changing the chemical makeup of the atmosphere, regardless of what the consequences are, there's some consequence. It's not a good thing to be doing. Everyone agrees with that. Most people agree with that. And so it makes sense to get to the yellow era, and the question is like how soon. It's all about when and how much damage. If there's damage, how much damage is happening before then? He says, let's not. It's the dumbest. He calls it the dumbest experiment in human history. Let's see if there's damage. No, let's not. Let's just try to get to this yellow era. And so he is approaching that with a couple of things. First, Solar City, of course, is dealing with trying to bring an economic forcing function into the solar world where it's much cheaper to use solar energy than anything else. That's a huge one, obviously. Another big one is transportation. Transportation accounts for about a third of our carbon emissions. That includes, planes and trucks and things like that. But what he would look at, and what I looked at when I started doing this post is, that's a locomotive from 1802. Okay, it's like one of the first locomotives with a steam engine, and it kind of worked by pushing this piston back and forth, and that turned the wheels. Cool for 1802. I'm impressed with the 1802 people. That's very awesome, right? But the problem is today, here's a car, right? That looks too similar to be 215 years apart. If you look at a plane in 1903, the Wright brothers plane, it wasn't super impressive. It was they went 120 feet, it went up, not that high, and 65 years later, we were on the moon. That's what humans can do, right? We can go from that plane to the moon in 65 years. This is 200 years. That doesn't make sense. So what Elon says about this is, technology doesn't just move forward like an organism on its own. It moves forward because something has to push it forward. Otherwise, why would it move forward? And right now, car companies have no pressure from they have no reason. They're selling tons of cars like this. Why would they go innovate? Innovation costs money. It takes risk. You have to be a lab experimenting on stuff to innovate. Why do that if we don't have to? So what Elon's trying to do, think about, another industry. All of our phones sucked 10 years ago. They all sucked. Your phone and your phone and your phone, they all sucked. Then the iPhone came out, an awesome phone. And suddenly every phone company had to create an awesome phone or die. Nokia didn't do it, they died. Samsung survived. This is what happened. So Elon's trying to create an iPhone car, and suddenly everyone's like, oh my God, we have to create a good electric car or die. That's what he's trying to do, right? Suddenly Tesla makes so much sense. I get it. It makes so much sense suddenly. You have to dig deep though. And all these little articles, they get written in Business Insider and all these other places, these little 300-word articles about Tesla, they just don't get to the bottom, so people continue to not get why Tesla makes a huge amount of sense, why we should all be rooting for Tesla. Then I moved to SpaceX. Similar story here. No one knows what SpaceX does. Now people maybe a little more now. A year ago, no one knew what SpaceX did, right? Some cool space company, some private space agency. Well, there's a couple things it does. What it does in the short term is it gets paid by people to take things to space. Simple. Someone needs a satellite in space, they'll pay SpaceX, and SpaceX will take it to space and put it in orbit. Simple. Okay, first of all, that's really cool. No private, very, very, well, actually one private company's been able to do that, but it's been very, very rare. It's basically, there's 9 countries that know how to do that. And SpaceX has managed to know how to do that. Started by Elon, who was an internet guy. He did PayPal and went from PayPal to SpaceX. This is, again, why I was like, I need to figure out what your secret is, because that is insane. No one goes from PayPal to SpaceX. But he did, and then it worked, and then he did it, and then he's taking stuff to space for people. Again, most countries don't know how to do this, even though they want to know how to do this. He also is doing it much cheaper than everyone else. So really crazy. But that's not what SpaceX really does. That's what SpaceX does to pay the bills while they do what they really do. What they really do is they try to dramatically lower the cost of space travel so that we can go to Mars, which sounds insane if you don't know the full story. Again, just like, why do we care so much about electric cars? Well, you look at the fossil fuels map, suddenly it makes sense. This is one thing. This is the history of mass extinction events on the planet, right? There's been 5 since animals got going. Okay, the most recent one is the dinosaur asteroid, which made the dinosaurs sad. Now, there will be more. We don't know when or what, right? A lot of people consider the impact of humans as creating its own right now, but there could be one that actually kills off humans, like an asteroid or something else. This will happen, we just don't know when, but much more concerning. These are 600 million years. It's a long time. Even if one happens relatively soon, that could be 3, 5, 10 million years away. That's a lot of millennia. What's much more concerning is what could happen in the next century, next 100 years, which is a hundredth of a millimeter on that screen, which is that we are creating unbelievable technology right now with power that this planet has never seen. And one mistake there could do the same. AI is a classic example. It might, it's the easiest example. There's also, of course, all these kinds of biological weapons and things that could enable a really bad terrorist with the wrong weapon could do tremendous damage that we can't even understand. But AI is like if we were on a planet of chimps and we created humans. That's a pretty impactful thing to have done if we were a bunch of chimps. Like, that's going to affect us in a lot of ways. And you know what we could do? Humans could, if we wanted to. We could just decide to extinct chimps. We could. We have the power to do that. It wouldn't be that hard for humanity to extinct chimps if we really wanted to. So we're building AI. It's not even, it's not biology at all. We don't know what kind of, it's not going to have empathy the way we think of empathy unless we specifically program it that way. And then, okay, well, we want the AI to do what's good. Okay, well, who decides what's good? I mean, people in this room have a different idea of what's good, let alone like people across the planet. ISIS thinks it knows what's good. ISIS doesn't think it's being bad. ISIS doesn't wake up and say, let's be bad today. ISIS thinks it's being good. Everyone basically, thinks they're being good, and we just have different conceptions of what good means. Someone has to program the AI, and the AI is going to have a lot of power that we will not be able to break. So this is, I can see this going into, suddenly it's like the Q&A is over and I haven't gotten to the topic yet. Tim's talked about AI the whole time. The point is, we were playing with fire in a lot of ways. We might want to back up the hard drive, okay? If you have a hard drive and you're starting to mess around with it in some serious ways, and there's one file on it that you really don't want to lose. And a mass extinction event is like the hard drive crashing, essentially, and then you boot it back up and 90% of the files are gone. If there's one file you care about, obviously everyone here would just copy it and back it up to another hard drive, right? And so that's what Elon wants to do. It sounds a little like people are like, really? That's the efficient way to do this? We're going to go to Mars. But the truth is, if you take a step back and think about, we're able to actually terraform Mars, okay? Down the road, enough technology, you will look at a picture of a beautiful blue sky and a green mountain and a lake and some people camping near the lake, and you will not know if you're looking at Earth or Mars. That's the eventual goal. That can happen, and if that happens, and you have 1 billion people on Mars and 6 billion people on Earth or whatever, we won't be sorry we did that. Maybe what that does is it builds life insurance in that our eggs aren't all in one basket. It just, once we're there, we're going to look back at the world, wow, we were all on one planet. What if something happened on that planet? The whole species would be gone. We'll look at that as a very primitive, very precarious situation. And so again, like Tesla, he doesn't want to force anyone or convince people to go to Mars. He wants to create an economic opportunity, a regular every 2-year cargo route. It has to be every 2 years because Earth laps Mars every 2 years. And so when they're next to each other, that's the chance for ships to come to and from Mars and back. And he wants to create an economic forcing function where maybe not everyone, most people don't want to go to Mars. Most industries don't want to deal with Mars, but some of them do. And some of them are going to make a ton of money, and then countries start jostling with each other for who can go and kind of claim the space. And then and so what happens is then all this, people start pouring technology into it. And then just like we went to the moon in 60 years when there was suddenly a reason to, suddenly there'll be a reason to advance all this technology and people will go there and terraform the planet and all of that. First step has to be to get this green area decent sized. So his belief is that if there's just 1 million people on Mars, which is a tiny, it's 1/7,000th of humanity, that's enough that's a sustainable civilization. What he means by that is if Earth blew up, asteroid hits Earth, the ships from Earth stop coming permanently. Those 1 million people, that's enough people. They have all the different industries they need covered. They could build that into a 7 billion person thriving civilization like we have here. He thinks that that's about the order of magnitude of people you need to do that. So in order to do that, you have to have the amount of people that can afford to go to Mars and the amount of people that want to go to Mars. The intersection of those sets reach 1 million people. Now, he thinks that the blue part is the hard part here. He thinks that if it is affordable, you'll get 1 in 7,000 people who are interested in going, okay? And the affordable part has to do with a few different things. Like I said, already SpaceX is taking satellites to space for a fraction of the cost because they built it in 2016, 2014, 2011. That's when they built these rockets. There are other rockets that are being used were basically designed in the 60s, and nothing much has changed, just like the cars haven't changed because there hasn't been a reason to change. There's been no pressure on this industry until SpaceX. So that's some of the cost, but they need to bring down the cost from about $10 billion per seat to go to Mars, which is about what it would cost now, to $500,000. That's not just some innovation's going to get you there. That's a dramatic thing. And the dramatic thing they want to do is they want to make rockets reusable. Now, the reason this matters, picture the airline industry, okay? You take a Delta flight, go from New York to California, you get over LA, you all get in your parachutes, you all parachute down, the plane goes and smashes into the ocean and blows up. They build a new plane for your flight home. Every coach ticket would cost $1.5 million. No one here would have ever flown in a plane. Flight would be for billionaires and governments. And who currently flies in space? Billionaires and governments. So that's the situation. One rocket goes up and it smashes into the ocean and it's gone. You can't drop a fancy electric thing into the ocean and have it work. So by creating a reusable rocket, one that can land like with dignity, picture an alien, picture the aliens in the movie, and they come down and the rocket smashes into the thing, and they parachute down in the water and they swim to the thing, we're all looking at them. It's not very intimidating on their side. What the aliens do is they do it like an adult and they land vertically. So Elon is like, let's do that the normal way. It's not easy. It's a tremendous engineering challenge. That's why the Soviet Union and the US have tried for a long time to get this. They put tens of billions of dollars in. They have not been able to figure this out. They would love to, obviously. Who wouldn't? It saves a huge amount of money. You don't have to build a new rocket every time you fly. SpaceX did because they're rad, because they just are really smart and they're really bold. And so this is what they've learned to do. This happened for the first time in human history last year, and now it's happening basically every time they fly. SpaceX is doing this. They're still the only company in the world that knows how to do this, including NASA. That's the rocket that just went up. That rocket had just done a real mission and put a satellite into orbit, and then it lands. It'll get the eventual goal is that rocket can go up and down 7 times in a day, and basically like a machine gun, just like firing satellites, or eventually firing human spaceships into orbit one at a time, and they'll all get up there and they'll all be there. It's the colonial fleet, and then that fleet will take off for Mars and all land vertically on Mars, and then the people can come back. This is real. This is also like 10 years away. People don't know this, but this is like 8, 10, maybe 12 if a bunch of things go wrong years from now. The Neil Armstrong of Mars is going to touch down on Mars. That's really going to happen because of Elon, this awkward dude that I talked to in my pajama pants. And so this is the rocket that they just unveiled that's going to do it. It actually doesn't even fit on the thing. That's a house. There's a dude, if you can see, and that's a 40-story office building. That's huge. Even this part from here up is the actual spaceship itself that takes the people. That's a 16-story building. This is a huge, huge rocket. And it's going to, and that's the rocket they're going to try to be basically first in 2024. They're going to launch one of them with, 10 brave astronauts. 2026, they might launch 3 of them with 300 astronauts total. That can fit 300 people in just that one if they want. And eventually they want 1,000 of those going every 2 years when Earth and Mars are next to each other. They want 300,000 people going to and from Mars, and this is just this regular thing. Not that hard to imagine 1 million people being there at that point. So this is real, and this is what, again, made me say, what the fuck is this guy's secret? Like, why is he radder than me and other people? Why does he know how to do this stuff? So the cool thing is that the answer isn't like, there's a lot of things that he is better than you at. He's smarter than you. He's much more hardworking and ambitious and like insane than you, all these things. The good news is I firmly believe that if that were the only things that it was, there would be a lot more Elon Musks. And I really believe that it's, the thing he's doing is not actually out of our reach. And I really believe that. And I think there's a ton to learn from this guy, along with Steve Jobs and the Beatles and the American forefathers and Martin Luther King and all these people that are famous for a reason. And they all were doing kind of the same thing. And I have examples we'll go through. Okay, so let's move into like what he's doing. And I think it has to do with the way he thinks, the way he reasons. So let's just talk about a simple example here that I think can there's a distinction. There's two buckets we're going to draw. We're going to talk about those two buckets all night. So we can use geology to kind of introduce these buckets. So one idea is, if you go back to 1650, there were two kind of camps within the world of geology. So they look at a bunch of geologists look at the Grand Canyon, right? One camp would say that is there because the Bible says there was a flood. We know it can't go back. The earliest that could have started is 6,000 years ago, because that's when the earth started. That's when God created the earth. And there was a flood. And that must explain, why there's fossils in this thing on land. That's odd. We have to reconcile that. It must have been the flood. It cracked the surface and whatever. So they would work hard to come up with ways to reconcile this fact they had, the Bible, with what they saw with their eyes. And they did. And there's a 15,000 word Wikipedia page called Flood Geology, where you can see all of these things. It's a very serious industry, or at least it was. It's less serious now. There are still people publishing books today about this. Now, the other kind of geologists back then, the other camp, said, look, we don't know anything. We don't know anything other than what we see. So let's just start with our observations and what we know about science, and let's use those as our puzzle pieces, and let's just build a conclusion from there. And when we find new information, we will replace puzzle pieces, and that'll change the conclusion, and we'll see what we get to. They quickly started bringing the date of the beginning of the earth back. What they found said, wait, this is not 6,000 years. This is 1 million years. This is 100 million years. This is 1 billion years. And before you know it, they were at 5 billion years old. And they had all these explanations for the Grand Canyon that suddenly started to fall into place. It was created by erosion. It was created by all these different eras of geology over time. And suddenly all this stuff made sense. In a way, they had a much easier job than the flood geologists who had to reconcile this story with what they saw. Now, most people in this room, whether you're religious or not, most people in this room are thinking to themselves, yeah, but I identify with the second kind. When it comes to science, I'm a science geologist. I'm not a flood geologist. Okay, I feel the same way. And yet, most of us in many parts of our lives are essentially flood geologists with a Bible, basing most of our conclusions on what that Bible says, regardless of whether our observations fit with it. Okay, and once you think about it this way, you'll start to see it all over the place in other people's behavior and in your own behavior. So if you want to think about this, you have to start by dividing our brain into the fact that it's hardware and software. We think of it, this is our mind. That's my mind. It's my brain. It's just one thing. But it's hardware and software, okay? The hardware is what we're born with. Not all hardware is created equal, right? We have people that have genuinely higher IQs than others, or talents that other people don't have. They're prone to certain things. Nature is a real thing, right? But nurture is, when it comes to the way we think, is probably an even bigger thing. Our software is kind of it's almost like the hardware is a ball of clay, and the software is what the tool that clay is shaped into by our nurture, by our experiences, and by our own efforts to grow and to change. And specifically tonight, I want to talk about, when it comes to our software, the way we reason, the way we draw conclusions. So the geologist looking at the Grand Canyon, having a bunch of input, and then coming up with a conclusion is one example. But all through life, we have our own Grand Canyons. We have our own things we are looking at, and information's coming in, and the conclusion comes out the other side. And that process is our reasoning. And we have to think actively. I think we just kind of think, yeah, humans are good at reasoning. We reason, and we just kind of assume that we just do it. But it's actually, you can do it in different ways. And you can do it in the flood way, or you can do it in the science way. So let's talk about these two buckets when it comes to reasoning with these terms. Reasoning from first principles versus reasoning by analogy, okay? Now, reasoning from first principles, that's a physics term. Physicists actually use this term all the time. First principles is their axioms. It's, it's the actual, if you remember from hideous physics class, or from math class with your proofs, you have the givens, right? And then from there, given the givens, you say, well, then therefore this, and you just say the only way to move forward given the givens is this dot, and you end up with a conclusion, right? And if one of the givens changes, everything changes. So it's kind of again, you start at the bottom from the things you know for sure, or the things that you think you know for sure, and you puzzle your way up to a conclusion from there. Elon says that if you want to reason the best way, look at how do it like a physicist. That's why he likes talking to physicists and working with them, even though he's not a physicist, he's an engineer. He loves physicists because he respects their process. And it's in general, ideally, it's the process of science. The idea is that science is humble. Science doesn't even have laws. Science has theories. A theory in science is essentially what any of the rest of us would call a law. It's something that they know pretty damn sure, the theory of relativity. I mean, we know that relativity is real, but we call it a theory because we don't ever want to say a law because something might change with the first principles. We accept that we are always being shocked by things we find. We thought Newton's laws of gravity were everything. It turns out that that's like Newton's laws of gravity is like noting the flatness of a huge field, right? And yes, you can judge where something is going to go on that field and how high the grass is and the ground is and all these parts of these fields because it's flat, right? But what relativity is like is taking a big step back and saying, oh, wait, that field is part of this huge sphere that's the Earth. So when it comes to examples of relativity that are much more extreme, suddenly Newton's laws don't hold up at all. Relativity is the big umbrella. Newton's laws is how you describe parts of relativity that are very prevalent in our conditions. That's the kind of thing that happens all the time in science, okay? The things that we think we're positive about, new evidence comes in, we learn something new, this is debunked. Well, life is the same way, right? We're constantly learning new things about ourselves, about the world. The world's also changing, so even if we get a handle on the world, new technology, new industries, new culture evolves. So if you think about even just starting SpaceX, okay? Most of us look at an internet entrepreneur. He comes out of PayPal. He sells PayPal. Okay, he first sold this other company called Zip2 that did like internet ads. When, by the way, then everyone thought that was insane. They said, yeah, I'm going to put advertising on the internet. That's literally, in 1995, people who wanted to, who tried to sell ads on the internet were treated like snake oil salesmen. Like, oh yeah, that's a great use of my money. I'm going to put an ad on the internet. But Elon, who was reasoning from first principles, so conventional wisdom said, you cannot advertise on the internet. It's like a game. It's like a thing. It's not real. That's not a real ad. Elon said, well, just looking at what I see, I think that this will be. Even though conventional wisdom doesn't agree, they will. If the conventional wisdom will come around, and of course it does, it just lags far behind. Then PayPal. People said, you can't bank on the internet. No one is going to put their financial information on the internet. That's, of course, now everyone does this. Then he finishes that. Everyone would say, do not start a rocket company. And people did. Someone showed him, this is true. A friend of his compiled a video of rockets exploding and showed it to Elon to be like, this is not something you want to be putting, not just all of your own money down. Because no one's going to invest in this internet guy wants to start a rocket company when even countries can't figure out how to do this. And yet he put all his money down on it. Now why? Because he looked and he said, okay, he read a bunch of rocket manuals. He learned a bunch of stuff. Again, conventional wisdom says you didn't go to school for that. Well, he said, what's school? First principle says, well, what's school? It's just data download. It's just information. I can get the information in lots of ways. I don't need a degree. Okay, if I get the information, I get the information. So he just started reading. And he has a really good natural understanding of physics and engineering. And then he started to look at the cost of a rocket. And he said, well, most of the cost is in these 5 middlemen that go between the mining of the material in, Zimbabwe or something to this rocket in Cape Canaveral ready to take off. So what if we vertically integrate? What if we try to get rid of the middlemen as much as we can? What could happen? And he started to realize that 98% of the cost were basically the middlemen. And before you know it, he said, I think we can build this. I think we can recruit the right people. I think we can build rockets for much cheaper. And he did a bunch of calculations. Again, he's much smarter than you are. And he was able to do some calculations on like a spreadsheet and come up to be like, I think we can land the rocket also. I think that conventional wisdom would say, so reasoning by analogy is when you say, well, what's already been done? What do I see? Let's assume that's truth. And I can iterate on it maybe, but let's basically assume that what's out there is out there for a good reason. What's not out there already is not out there for a good reason. So reasoning by analogy, you'd look at the SpaceX situation and you'd say, no one has been able to land a rocket. NASA and the Soviet Union with $10 billion haven't been landing a rocket. I think You, as an Indian entrepreneur, you probably can't either. Easy. Such simple, obvious, conventional wisdom, right? Reasoning by analogy says do not start SpaceX. Reasoning from first principles, turns out that when he actually looked at the actual first principles, he said, I don't see a good reason not to. And this seems like a really important company. I don't think it's a guaranteed success, but again, my first principles reasoning says, what's the worst that happens if I fail? Nothing that big a deal. I'm gonna give it a try. And so he started SpaceX. Now, why do we reason by analogy? All of us. I mean, what seems so logical here to be a science geologist about something like starting a new company is so unnatural for us. It's so rare. Okay, that's why he's so rare. Why are we all science flood geologists when it comes to something like starting a new company or something like that? Let's think about this, okay? We all grew up playing the why game. You know, kids, they're insufferable. And they'll say, you know, you have to put your boots on. Why? Because it's cold outside. Why? Because it's the winter. Why? Because the earth is tilted, a thing where it's not at the thing, and the grazing off the sun. Why? Because the gravity of the earth, and when it goes like this, it's in a different part, and now the tilt is this way. Why? Because originally the earth, you know, and you keep going and going and going forever. What's a kid actually trying to do, though? A kid is taking a conclusion. Those boots should be on my feet, and trying to deconstruct the reasoning that built it to get down to the first principles. Every why brings them down a floor. At the very bottom would be the first principles. Kids have the right instincts to dig through reasoning, to understand how reasoning is built so he can build reasoning himself later. Okay? But well, parents sounds, the first comes cute. Oh, he's so curious. My kid is so curious. It's so great. You know, the 800th time on busy day, he's like, you're going to put your fucking boots on. That's why. Because I said so. Why? Because I said so. Because I said so is a concrete floor under which no further whys may pass. That's it. There's your first principles. Because I said so. Right? Now, what does because I said so really mean? It says obey authority. Right? Because I, an authority over you, said so. Doesn't matter why. Don't hurt yourself by reasoning too hard. Obey. Don't reason, obey. This is what we tell kids. This is what all of us were told. Not just by parents, we're told it in school. We're told it all the time by society, by conventional wisdom. Don't reason too hard, just obey. We're taught this is a fundamental principle. Now, you think, how would this go over in the science world? Picture like Ms. Hawking, okay? Another photograph I have, handy. So he's there hanging out, doing his thing on the board, and Dyson comes in, he's like, oh, Dyson, Hawking, you know, they're friends. And he says, no, shut up. Listen to this shit. I just proved string theory. Huge deal, right? So Hawking's like, how the hell did you do that? And he's like, I just did. And Hawking's like, right, but why is definitely true? And Dyson's like, because I said so. He's like, what the fuck is going on? Doesn't work. Hawking would be like, this guy's gone insane. Like, get him out of the institution. He's not, he wouldn't be like, oh, guess what? String theory is true. He wouldn't be like that. He'd be like, this guy's nuts. This guy has no reason for anything. In the science world, it wouldn't fly because it's not real reasoning, right? It doesn't really work. And the science is based on evidence. If you want to say, I've proven something new, everyone's going to say, okay, deconstruct your reasoning. Well, they're going to play the why game and say, till they get to the bottom, until they say, you're right. The first principles do add up to this. But we constantly are just accepting because I said so. And it's not just from our parents. When we grow up hearing from our parents, you should obey because I said so, and a teacher, it starts with our parents and our teachers, and our older siblings maybe, it quickly turns into all these other things. The only way we know how to reason is we need to figure out an authority who said so. So a lot of times it's conventional wisdom, a lot of times it's a quote, or it's an opinionated friend of ours, or maybe it's our religion or our ethnic background, or it's our professor, or it's the media or a movie you saw, or whatever, some celebrity you respect. You need someone that says so because I don't know how to reason. I need to make sure I'm just figuring out an authority to obey. This is what we're trained to do, so this is what we obviously know how to do. There's some, I pulled it up here, there's some really depressing quote. So in the 1960s, refresh the page. Okay, hold on a second. tech things at the worst moment here. Okay. In the 1960s, a creative performance researcher conducted a study of 1,600 5-year-olds, and 98% of the children scored in the highly creative range. Okay. Then retested in 5-year increments. When the same children were 10 years old, only 30% scored as highly creative. The number dropped to 12% by the age of 15, 2% by the age of 25. As children grew into adults, they effectively had the creativity trained out of them. Creativity, you're creating something, right? You're creating something from scratch, just using your own reasoning. That's it. That's all you have. That's trained out of you right away and obey. Obeying is the opposite of creative. It's by definition, you're not creating something new, you are copying something that said so, right? So this is what we learn. And so the way we can talk about these same two buckets I keep talking about, flood geologists and science geologists, reasoning from first principles, reasoning by analogy, cooks and chefs. And the reason I use that is just it's simple. We use chefs and cooks, obviously, often in society we use those words interchangeably, but we can talk about chefs as writing the recipe, writing a recipe from first principles. The first principles for a chef, food, ingredients, raw ingredients. They create a recipe, and a cook follows a recipe. Takes the recipe and just does what the recipe says. And if you think about this, most of us in the end are looking at someone else to see what they're doing in the bowl, and there's very few people that are actually kind of just puzzling with ingredients, right? Now, it doesn't make sense to puzzle all the time. In fact, it makes sense to puzzle almost none of the time, and Elon would say the same thing. If you puzzle all the time, you are going to run out of mental energy very quickly. It's not easy to reinvent the wheel with your reasoning. It's very difficult. So most of the time, reasoning by analogy is a really clever evolutionarily mental shortcut we have. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can basically, cut corners as much as we can, so we can save our first principles reasoning for what really matters. But the question is, what really does matter? So if you look at every industry, all of the famous people in these industries, almost every one of them, if you think about it hard, they've done a lot of reasoning from first principles. They're chefs, okay? The Beatles in music, the Beatles were doing in their first 4 years, they were the most popular band in the world, but they were doing, She Loves You, yeah. That was very of the genre. It was, there was bubblegum pop. It was really great, but it was of the genre. And then they got so popular that they started to say, I think we can start getting weird, and people are going to come with us. They like us so much, they'll come with us anywhere. Let's just start. And they experimented. You listen to some of there are strange albums. The White Album is weird. Abbey Road is super weird. There's a rapey song after Here Comes the Sun. It's a very strange, they got weird, but what did they do? By experimenting and just starting to play with raw ingredients and not worrying about what is the typical music, now let's iterate on it and make our own version of it. They just said, let's just do something. They completely revolutionized music. And then you have bands like Pink Floyd, copying them. All these other cooks then start coming around and saying, wow, let's all this new stuff they created, and basically music completely changed because of them. I can, we don't have time, but I can literally give an example just like that in every single one of these areas and any other area. But of course, it's not black and white. So A, it's complicated. It's not that you are a chef, you are a cook, you're a chef. It's that every one of us is, first of all, it's a spectrum, okay? There's not a pure chef or pure cook. We're always somewhere on this spectrum, and in different parts of each of our lives, we're somewhere or another on this spectrum. So, I am a total cook when it comes to what I wear. I'm wearing this because I think I'm supposed to wear this, because my friend told me that these wool shoes are comfortable. I don't have any original thought when it comes to wardrobe. I don't care. I don't understand clothes. I don't know how it works. I don't know what a fancy, a dress-up girl looks like versus a casual, and they literally both dresses. I don't know the difference. And that's fine. That's me cutting corners most of the time, right? In other areas, I find one way I'm very chef-like is I learned early on that when Americans tell me this place is dangerous, don't travel there, usually it's great to ignore them. Especially Americans that don't travel very much. They've been to Western Europe and they've been to the beach, and that's about it. When they tell me, don't go to Peru, don't go to Pakistan, it's super dangerous there, I'm going to say, that's not real information. I'm now going to go into message boards, I'm going to talk to people who've traveled places, I'm going to talk to people who've lived there, and I'm going to ask them and use my own reasoning to get there. I'm very chef-like there. I've been to North Korea. Ha! None of you None of you have done that. I went to Kurdish Iraq. I'm very proud of this because I'm very chef-like here. It feels great to be chef-like. I'm so arrogant and obnoxious about my traveling, as you can tell, because I feel so confident in my chef-like abilities. I've discovered the epiphany with traveling that conventional wisdom is worth ignoring, and I have the confidence to actually act on that. Now, if I could do that in all parts of my life, I wouldn't be here. I'd be on a rocket with Elon somewhere. But I at least have a model in my own life. I say I want to be more like Traveler Tim and less like Fashion Tim when it really matters. That's the question for all of us, is when does it really matter? When are the times that really define, when we're on our deathbed, what we look back at our life, these major things, what's on our epitaph? These are the moments that really define our lives. That's when we need to roll up our sleeves and do the hard, really mentally hard and kind of unpleasant and kind of scary work of being a real chef. So it's a spectrum in the culinary world. On one side you're a 100% verbatim recipe follower, and then as you move along, you get a little more, bold with the kind of, I'll do a little extra of this because you start to be a little bit more of a chef. But then at the very end, you're a total, 100% chef, and you just have you're farming and growing, picking things out of the earth and making new things. No one is on any 100% or 0% of that spectrum. We're all somewhere in the middle. And in the real world, when it comes to the cook and the chef, the metaphorical kind, it's the same thing. So no one 100% copies and follows. And no one 100% creates and leads. Every famous musician or writer or artist will tell you they have influences, right? No one is creating from scratch, but we can do a lot more or a lot less. Here's the problem. So there's a couple of reasons why this is so hard. So we're going to talk about how we can be more chef-like, right? Is that we see it wrong. We have an initial delusion, which prevents us from even understanding the problem, okay? The real thing, if you look back, is that most of these are cooks, right? To one extent or another, and then the very end, they're a chef. Most of us are followers in most areas, whether we like it or not, we just are. We were trained that way. It's hard not to be. We see it different. We see it as, look, I might not be Elon, but I'm no follower. I'm a leader. I'm the senior vice president of this. I'm a leader. There's followers in the very end, those dumb people. And so what we do is, first of all, we attribute this as intelligence. We say, those are followers or idiots. I'm smart. It's not about smart and dumb. It's about the way you reason. So when it comes to the way we think about this, it's almost like when I see a bunch of people all assuming that they're leaders, and it's like a bunch of typewriters looking at a computer and being like, that is one talented typewriter. But it's not a talent, it's not smart typewriter, it's a different thing altogether. And that's the point, is it's a different thing in the first place. It's not that it's a smarter, everyone attributes Elon, Steve Jobs, they're so smart. It's not that they're smart, it's that they're literally fundamentally different in the way that they reason in the first place. And so, why do we have this delusion? Why do we mistake, why do we think that we're a leader when actually we're just the lead follower of a bunch of people? Because we're still doing what we're doing because society told us it's a good thing to do, because our parents said it was a respectable thing to do, because whatever. We have this delusion, and I think there's three kind of things that kind of make up this delusion. The first is that we mistake the chef's clear vision of the present for visions into the future. So chefs they're just current, okay? They just see the world, they look at the world, and that's their first principles. Their observations of the actual world as it is today, and then they build reasoning based on that. If you do that, you're going to be seen as a major, massive visionary, because everyone else is basing their opinion on what's right to do based on the world on conventional wisdom. Conventional wisdom, as we already discussed, lags 10 years, sometimes 50 years behind. Seriously. Because who does conventional wisdom come from? Our parents? When were they, around? So that's the first thing. If you look at someone I look at this, our reality box. This is how we see it. We see it as, we believe We look at the things that are possible today. And Elon somehow has this amazing vision of what will be possible in the future. He's a genius. He just sees this stuff. The truth is, it's like I said, we're looking at what actually was possible 10, 50, 30 years ago. And Elon's just looking at what's possible today. When everyone says, well, SpaceX, no one could build a rocket, NASA, he looks and says they're doing it with 1960s technology. I think if I just did it I look at the actual prices of raw materials today, I look at the engineers I could have access to, I don't see any reason. Everyone's like, wow, he's just such a visionary. And a similar idea, and by the way, just to go back for 1 second, the American forefathers is a perfect example of this. They were around in 1750, 1770, and they're looking at the world today, and they said, I don't think we need a king. I think we have a better way to do this. And they just built this, and they've seen these incredible visionaries, because everyone else had a king, because they were all thinking 50, 70, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago. Another example, we mistake the chef's accurate understanding of risk for courage. So again, they're just looking at the truth about risk. And we see them as incredibly courageous because we overrate the risk. Classic example, child Elon. This is a real quote from his biography. Okay, he's 7. He said, when I was a little kid, I really scared of the dark, and I came to understand dark just means the absence of photons in the visible wavelength. 400 to 700 nanometers. Then I thought, well, it's silly to be afraid of lack of photons. And then I wasn't afraid of the dark anymore after that. What a psychopath. Who wants to be friends with that 7-year-old? What an annoying 7-year-old. And yet, as adults, we say, well, he's right there. He might be a little piece of shit, but he's actually correct. It's cute. He knows. And he said he actually said this to a 7-year-old girl. In recess, she said, I'm scared of the dark. And he said, well, actually. And we say, of course, the 7-year-old girl is cute, but the truth is, we see she's being a child, she's being irrational, she doesn't know the truth about light, and he does. Good for him, right? And yet, today, adult Elon this is a real quote from him, sometimes people fear starting a company too much. Really, what's the worst that could go wrong? You're not going to starve to death, you're not going to die of exposure, what's the worst that could go wrong? Same quote. The only difference is we're all the 7-year-old girl when it comes to this quote. We are all the 7-year-old in the playground with him who says, well, starting, I don't know about that. I have this apartment, and I have this kid, and I just, what if I fail? And look, 1 in 10 restaurants succeeds, I don't know. And he's just looking at this and saying, what's actually going to happen? What's going to really happen? You're going to have a bunch of first world problems, probably, if you fail. You'll be fine. He actually lived on $1 a day for 30 days in college as a test. To say, what? He survived. He bought some potatoes, I think. And he was like, it was a good thing to do because it was like, if I run out of money, it'll be okay. That's an amazing lesson to absorb. It makes you realize that the feeling of risk doesn't equal actual risk of danger. Because what does risk mean? That danger is afoot. And he knows that a lot of times when people think there's risk, there's not actual danger. So you can almost look at the danger scale. Well, what we all consider safe, we all agree that 1 through 4 is safe, just say, and 7 through 10 are actual dangerous when you could run out of food, you could get hurt, you could die, you could hurt someone else. 4 through 7 is this magical land that the chefs know about, and they say, well, I'm just going to go and start that company. I'm going to go and I'm going to do an album, put it on YouTube, and start playing everywhere because who cares if people laugh at me? Who cares? I don't care. I'm going to do this. I think I'm good. Most people don't go there. It's too scary. There's too much risk, but it's fake risk. And so that's the chef's lab. That's where they go play, and they succeed wildly over the rest of us because we're all hiding in 1 through 4 land when there's nothing to be scared of. And if we just knew there's so much reward in 4 through 7 land, if we could just understand that there's not real danger there. Okay, finally, we mistake the chef's originality for ingenuity, right? For brilliance. Classic example, the iPhone, okay? Everyone's like, Steve Jobs was such a genius. I don't think he was a genius. I really don't think he was a genius. I think he was an incredible chef. He was an arrogant fuck. But it served him when it came to, he said, anytime conventional wisdom, Peter Thiel does the same thing, okay? Peter Thiel loves to be contrarian, okay? That's why everyone's mad at him right now. But the truth is, there's something to it when it comes to business because it's just saying it's this understanding that conventional wisdom is so often wrong. And so everyone else started, Apple could start a normal person, if they were Apple starting a phone company, never done it before, they'd say, okay, so where are we going to put the keyboard? Let's make it a very Apple-like keyboard. It's going to be really sleek. It's going to be beautiful, better than any keyboard. That would have been reasoning by analogy. What Steve Jobs and Apple did is they said, what should a mobile device be? And let's use our experience as people and our understanding of technology and our observations of what's out there. and they used those as their first principles. By the time they reasoned to the top, there was no keyboard. Didn't make sense. This is not that genius an idea. It just took someone to say conventional wisdom isn't making sense here. They're all building keyboards they shouldn't be. That's all it took, an understanding of the technology that was possible today. Okay, there's so many examples like that. So, final thing here is how do we get better at this? The problem here, we can understand this, but every cell in your body is going to resist the attempt to be more chef-like. Why? Because who are we? What's our physical body? What am I? I'm an animal that was optimized to be really great at surviving in a tribe in 50,000 BC in Ethiopia. That's what every one of us actually is. Okay? Now civilization moves at it just flies. 50,000 years, how much progress has happened. Our biology snails along. It barely has changed. It has changed basically 0% since then. So every part of us, now, if you're in a tribe, okay, what makes you a surviving tribe member? Fitting in, staying in the tribe, being in favor of the chief. When the chief says so, you do it. Okay, following authority really well, being liked by everyone. Okay, not thinking too hard, not being an original, fitting in, looking like everyone else. That's survival. You need your tribe. If your tribe kicks you out, you're going to starve, you're going to get killed by other tribes, you're going to die. You're going to be a slave of another tribe. It was all about fitting in. Now, today, we don't live in that world. All of those very good reasons that we're cooked like, the reasons aren't here anymore, but we're still cooked like, which is now hurting our ability to do all this awesome stuff. We have this luxury that we don't have to be cooked like, but our brains don't know it. So we have to our consciousness, which is a very, very weak, lame person inside this brain. Our consciousness has very little power. We have to do everything we can to get that consciousness to try to just work hard to convince the animal brain to just be more chef-like, because there's no good reason not to. 3 things that can help us get there. Epiphanies that we need to have. These are real epiphanies, and once you have them, you never forget them. Okay, Steve Jobs has some quote about, once you realize, that there's no reason to be scared of not fitting in, not doing the right thing, your life will not be the same. It's true. So the first epiphany, you don't know shit. It's true. You're the sad guy there. You're not the other people. You're the sad guy. Okay? It's the starting point of humility. Look, what did the science geologists do? When everyone say, no, we know that the Earth started 6,000 years ago. We know there was a flood. They said, I don't know shit, which was this amazing springboard towards truth that the other ones didn't even have. You have to start with I don't know shit to get anywhere. Okay? Because what you have in mind is a lot of conventional wisdom that doesn't apply. All of these guys, everyone, and I could have done 20 of these, they all, in different ways, have quotes saying, I don't know shit. So Feynman says, I was born not knowing, and I only have a little time to change that here and there. Elon says, you should take the approach that you're wrong. Your goal is to be less wrong. They all, the best scientists, the best engineers, the best entrepreneurs, artists, they all start by saying, whatever I think I know, we'll start with a blank slate. The cool thing is you can add to that the second epiphany, which is that no one else knows shit either. They're all sitting down now. They're all sad. Okay, it's like the emperor has no clothes thing, right? You can start, the first thing is you're like, well, yes, the emperor has clothes. Everyone said that. The first step is, I don't know that, so therefore that guy's pretty naked, actually. The second step is when everyone's being like, no, he has clothes, you're like, no, I don't think you know more than I know, and that guy's not, it's his dick there. So, I mean, he doesn't look like he has clothes on to me, and I don't believe you. So the first one gives you humility, the first epiphany. The second epiphany is key to couple with it, which is confidence. The confidence to say, I don't know shit, but I'm as good a person to try to figure it out as anyone else. I don't care what they say. I'm as good a person to figure it out as anyone else. So Elon said, yeah, I don't know about rockets, but no one else does either. So Steve Jobs said, oh, Nokia and Samsung, they all know about phones. I don't. RIM, they all know about phones. And he basically said, no, they don't know about phones either. Let's face it, no one knows about phones. So I'm as good a person to figure out how to do a good phone as anyone. It's the second epiphany. And here's this quote I mentioned a second ago. Basically, says, everything around you that you call life was made up by people that were no smarter than you. That's like such a thing that's so hard for us to absorb. Our brain is made to follow the chief and just say, yeah, convention. And by the way, in 50,000 BC, conventional wisdom, don't eat that berry, that was good advice, Conventional wisdom in 50,000 BC was really good to listen to. Today, the world's changing so rapidly, conventional wisdom doesn't apply anymore. It's always outdated. So, yeah, but we have to absorb that. And finally, the absence of photons isn't scary. So we can absorb the first 2 epiphanies and say, that guy is naked. I don't care what you say. That's definitely a naked dude. And then we still, though, in the story, the Emperor's New Clothes, there's the kid who's like, that guy is fucking naked. And everyone's like, oh my God, yeah, I was thinking this. The kid is the one who says it, right? So we can have the epiphany. We can know that they're not right. We can know that guy's still naked, even though, but nothing comes out of our mouth. We want to quit that job, but no, we don't actually quit. Even though we know it's not risky, but we still don't really do it. We want to get divorced, but next year we'll go to therapy. All these big moves that our reasoning says, this is right, it's right. We say, yeah, we procrastinate on it because we can't quite make the move, and because we have this fear. It's just scary. And the final epiphany is, it's not scary. The absence of photons isn't scary. So much of what we're scared of is just the absence of photons. It's not real. Again, you can't have enough quotes from successful people telling you that failure is awesome, which is really annoying. But there's something to it. All these guys, every one of these people, they have so much conviction about failure is the road that you take to success. It's not the thing to avoid. It's literally it's the stepping stones to success. So we'll leave you with that. And I'm talking about all this stuff in the context of career, but the truth is, it applies to life just as much with the kind of people you spend time with. I saw something like one of these Instagrams that was like, life hack, you literally don't have to spend time with people you don't like. It's like, but first principles reasoning, I have a limited time on this earth, this person makes me feel terrible about myself, I'm just bored by them. You don't have to waste your precious seconds with anyone you don't want. There's so many things like this. If you just pause and reason for first principles, you'd say, wait, this makes no sense. There's so many parts of our lives and our careers that way. And the thing that the cook-chef thing can do is it can just help us remember that it's rational to be bold, to be ourselves, and that we're actually fighting against our own irrationality, and that the thing that Elon has over all of us, Steve Jobs has, the Beatles have, honestly, they're very talented, but most of the thing that really separates them is that they had absorbed these epiphanies. And that's cool, because we can do that too. So that's it. Thank you.
So just because I don't know your full background, I'm assuming that your background is not engineering. Okay. I kind of got that from the presentation. I love your presentation. It was amazing. But one of the things I noticed was you were saying that these people are having these epiphanies and taking in this rational thought. And maybe because I am an engineer and come from that background, and that's just how we all think. And a lot of those people like Steve Jobs and Elon Musk is not because they're special in the sense that they had the epiphany and moved on that thought. It was just they were the first to market. And just because with Steve Jobs, with the iPhone, I knew people in 2004 who were building apps before the iPhone. It's just that they were at companies that didn't have the money to come out as the iPhone. And with Elon Musk, with his SpaceX, which I think is an amazing company, I also know personally, I was working on what NASA called the CRV, which was a spaceship that could come back and go back and go back and back and back, but it got defunded when Bush became a president. So that technology was there, and people were doing those type of things. It's just that they lost the money or didn't have the money, and then these other people came there who had both the foresight and the funds to do that. And so...
Okay, well, so I understand the question, and I think it can appear that way.
Yeah.
But here's why I think that's not the story. And the reason I think it is because Tesla. So 2009, there is not one car company. Now, in 1990, there were this little wave of electric vehicles, and then some regulation got passed, and they all disappeared. 2009, there was not one major car company that you've heard of that made an electric car. Tesla comes out with a really good electric car, shows that it can be done, shows that you use these little AA-sized batteries, 10,000 of them, and it's a secret, and you do this. What do you know, a few years later, basically every car company you've heard of now is an electric car. Okay, so you're talking about the iPhone. Oh, people just, they didn't have the funds, they wanted to do this, they couldn't, and Apple had the money. It can't be the case because there was not any company doing a good smartphone where you could really be on the internet, you had a full touch screen. At least none that I had heard of. And what'd you say?
There were companies doing that.
Okay, a couple.
Allowed to show it. I know people who worked at Google who had those apps and they were
But I don't believe that Steve Jobs just had some more money. He just had some guts. Well, but 2 years after he's first to market, suddenly 20 other companies have a smartphone, right? That because he showed that actually people will buy this. Everyone said you still need a keyboard. Well, no, you didn't. He just had the guts to kind of hypothesize that and then put money down on the hypothesis. There are so many examples where, again, the Beatles had all these copycats, and it wasn't that they, were more. I don't believe they were honestly. I think they were very musically talented, but I think that they had got popular enough that they had the ability to just be a chef about music and have people still listen anyway, and that changed everything. So I just think that, yes, there are some cases when people have maybe the first epiphany, maybe even the second epiphany. They understand that the world is not totally, that conventional wisdom isn't right. They have better ideas. They know how things should go. But they don't put their money down on it. They don't. No, look, it's not that it's black and white. I'm sure what you're saying, I'm sure a lot of the cases, they're simply that, we look at the first mover, whoever it happens to be, the first person who happens to get there, and we say, look at what a chef they are. Everyone else followed them. And maybe that's not the full story, but most of the time, in both your personal life, in both culture, in technology, you will find again and again and again. There's so many examples. Look at the US, was like, we don't need a king. We can do this without one, but we'll have a president, we'll have like a kind of king. It seemed kind of like weird, but they were just being like, look, we are smart enough to figure this out. Let's try something. They were in a very unique position to try something. And they did. If you look at, there's a graph I found where it's basically they were the first, in that time there was basically no real democracies the way that the constitutional democracies at the time. And just they all started springing up right after the US. I mean, one after the other. And it's not a coincidence. It wasn't, it usually is still some chef moment, some chef guts that gets it going, not, we finally have enough money, we can do this. That's just not usually the full story. But I see your point. I don't think it's black and white, but I do believe very firmly from looking at examples that that's kind of the way things go. But we can agree to disagree. Yeah.
Sorry, now I feel bad. It's a very simple question. So, in the beginning, you mentioned that when you were thinking about Elon Musk and what made him who he is, you mentioned speaking to his executives, and then you talked about examples like his book and things like that. But you didn't really talk about who he is as a person when you were talking to him. Did he seem self-aware? Did you ask him himself, or was it just from kind of bystanders and the books? And
he's just like creepily logical. Like he'll like I'll be like, oh, like so what's your philosophy on like parenting and versus work? And he'll be like, well, he has 2 twins and then 3 triplets, and he'll be like he did that on purpose. That was like a thing, one of the in vitro situations. And he was like, and he'll be like, well, the triplets are starting to gain consciousness, so I should be. I'm like, it's a weird way to, and I just got the impression talking to him. I'm like, he sees his children as his 5 favorite computers. He's like, this is the best computers I know, and I want to like help them, build the best software. I mean, but it all leads into very like healthy places, I find, because he's just free of delusion, which sounds insane to us. He has some quote in his bio where he's like, I think I should get a girlfriend. Like, how much time does a girlfriend need? Like, I think like 10 hours a week. I need to block 10 hours. I'm like, that's a strange way to think about getting a girlfriend. But like, you know what? If you have limited time and you have this many hours and you're trying to do this thing and you want to get a girlfriend, like actually that's a responsible way to think. A lot of people just get a girlfriend and then they're a terrible boyfriend, or they fuck their career in the wrong time. So I think like listening to him, I kept being like, you're almost not a human. You're kind of like a robot. And that continually, I was like, but that's like a really, really like rational, logical way to think about it. So I think he is so like, if you're Elon, you're just this super rational being, and you look around, you're like, why is everyone nuts? Like, so I think he sees it, he's like, everyone is nuts. The car companies are nuts, the people are nuts, like, we're literally like changing the atmosphere. We're digging up carbon that's buried for 600 million years. We're putting it into the carbon cycle. Obviously, that's gonna, and so he's just, I think if you listen to his interviews, he's just like, what a robot with no like previous misconceptions, no fear of fitting in, no emotions. what would they think about everything? And that's kind of what he thinks. Now, to be fair to him, people see him as like a cyborg, or he's kind of like Asperger's-y. The truth is, he doesn't strike me as that way. I think he has a pretty high EQ, and I think he actually understand. I think he cares about his kids a ton. I think he actually is a very balanced human in a way that people wouldn't understand that just from looking at an interview. But I think he's got it. He's just I don't know. I just talking to him is very inspirational because I'm like, right, okay, it's like a reminder. I'm like, right. Because talking to him, I'm in clear land. I'm like, right, everything's so clear up here. And then I leave and I'm back in foggy human land where I'm like, what did he say? What was the thing I should do about the thing? But I think it's very healthy to listen to interviews with really any of these amazing people you admire. Just listen to them. Look at their interviews, read their autobiographies, look at their quotes. They have, the people got places often for a reason and what we always assume is they're smarter than we are. They're more talented. We always make that assumption. They're just geniuses. I'm not. And it's almost always, I think, the other way. Obviously, people who make it far are very smart. They have something. But we all have a lot of us, especially people in this room, you guys have something. So it's a question of it's usually their ability to kind of see through fake fear to be bold, and see through fake conformity to just do what they think. I find that again, as soon as I wrote this post, I started seeing it everywhere. So yeah. I think you gotta.
Yeah. So my close, or I can just speak really loudly. Hey. So actually, I've seen you speak a couple times before, and I read Wed by Twy, and I also read and write a lot in the space of studying rationality. I feel like we read the same blogs and books. And what I've noticed in a lot of that space is people who understand on an intellectual level the thing you're saying about chefs and cook and rationality, and everyone's insane, but it's hard to turn to action. So I'm curious, when you started with but why you had some things that set it apart. So you have stick figure photographs, very lifelike, going long form, not sticking to a schedule. Since you got this picture, what have you changed about blogging or your life in general?
Yeah, I mean,
inspired.
it's hard. Changing is really hard. We are wired to not change, and we're conditioned to not change. And then even when we do change, then we slip back, right? But just writing about this stuff, my job being to think about what I think and talk to people and then try to frame it, is helpful to build awareness, just to build reminders, and at least if I'm being irrational, I'm usually aware of it now, which really helps. So I wouldn't say I've changed a huge amount, but I will say that even just the awareness, just thinking about things the way they really are, which is that we are running on software. Most of it is just pre-programmed by our genetics, by our being a human. The rest of it was programmed by our parents and our society, right? And then whatever is left is programmed by whatever habits we happen to get into, right? And realizing that all a habit is a software program that's running on automation. And that it seems if you're in a habit, a bad habit, it seems impossible that you're that's just who I am. No, it's not. It's that there's an automated system happening. And you can overwrite it. And you do it one day and then you slip back. Yeah, because the automation kicks back in. They talk about it takes 21 days to break a habit. Once if you understand that, you're wait a second. Yes, I want to slip back in, but if I just can do this 21 days, literally the automation program will have been rewritten, and it'll become very easy to do this. It takes a huge amount of willpower to break a bad habit. Until 21 days or whatever it is passes, suddenly it takes no willpower, because now it takes willpower to do the other thing, because now the automated program is running the other direction. That's just an example of the kind of thinking that I do on this blog, the kind of way I would think about a habit. I would try to compare it to something like a software program. And doing that then helps you fight through a bad habit because you're aware of the truth, which is that this is just a software program. The danger is when you think this is just who I am, you're not aware of the reality of what a habit is, and then you just give into it. So much of what we give into, so much of what we just, is just us not understanding the reality of what's actually going on. And that applies to that's an example from inside our brain, and this presentation was an example for how we interact with the world. But like, yeah, I just feel like awareness of reality is literally like 90% of the battle, and then continuing like effort to try to like act on what you know is true. And so, yeah, writing a blog has helped me. I mean, your question was like specifics. One example I can give is I've always lived with like my like major procrastination issues with my instant gratification monkey, the nightmare of my world. And like writing about it helped me come to an epiphany. That so for people who haven't like read that post or seen my talk on it, like it's like I talk about there's basically an adult and a kid in your brain, and they're always fighting with each other. And procrastination is when the kid is taking the wheel, when the adult's like, why are we, get off the wheel, and the kid's like, no, and the kid has the wheel. That's essentially procrastination is, and someone who doesn't procrastinate, it's because the adult's like, not now, like you go over here and like take the wheel. And for me, like thinking about those two characters, as opposed to just being like, I'm one human, I'm one thing, and I'm procrastinating, to be like, no, there's two things, and there's a power struggle. That helped me think about the power struggle and realize, like, it's not that I'm the adult and I have this like terrible kid that I'm dealing with who's just the worst. I'm like, no, it's the reality that I'm both of these things, and I'm a terrible parent. I'm like bad. I don't give the kid, I'm not like nice to the kid, I don't give the kid time, I have no compassion. I'm like always, I wish he would disappear. I'm like trying to kick him. And it was the awareness to be like, look, we have a compromise. I'm gonna do this now, and then you're gonna get this time later. In like a very, I sound like insane person right now. Every time, I cannot talk about this topic without sounding like a legit insane. But the point is, it's that kind of like, the awareness that I built in myself just by writing about these two characters, then helped me hit the epiphany that, wait a second, I need to like accept the kid and like be nice to the kid. And when I do that, it's amazing how much more in control of myself I am. So I can go on, there's so many examples. The habit was one of them, this is one of them. I have so many examples of like, thinking hard about reality. I'm not an expert on any of this stuff. I'm not a psychologist. It's just thinking about how I am. You guys could all do the same exact thing. Is an amazingly powerful thing. Because you're like, wait a second. This is like all that's really happening is this. And once you have that, you're like, wait, then I can do this. So I feel like, and I'm 3 years into writing this blog. Hopefully in 10 years, I'm better than I am now. But at least I feel like I'm on an upward trajectory because of the blog. And I feel like if you're on an upward trajectory, even if it's a light slope, 10, 20 years later, you're a much better person. You're more in control. You're better to be around. You're better to the people in your life. You're making better life decisions than if you're on a flat trajectory. So I think it's helped me at least be like that. 3 years in, maybe I can't tell you that many concrete examples, but I do feel this versus that. And that means I'm growing. So, yeah.
One last question. That's the best one. So you can choose.
Great talk, by the way. I just want to ask you, did you ever feel that there's a correlation about this epiphanies happening more in America, for instance? I totally get what you mean by, that's the way to innovation and success. It just so happens that it always happens more in this country. Like, just us even having this talk, right? First you meet Elon Musk, right? And then you write about this, and then Ivy invites you here, and then there's a whole culture in America that motivates this, right? And there are many like famous scientists in Russia, but like there's not, they don't grow up watching movies about this Russian scientist, but we watch the movie about Steve Jobs, or you go to Barnes Nobles and read about, there's biographies about them. There's not a Moscow Barnes Nobles that these Russian kids go and read about this cool Russian scientist, or a movie like A Beautiful Mind. Like, even if he's awkward, so I feel like what you said is true. And what's more, that this country promotes the culture of that. Just like how they're promoting a culture, a celebrity culture and all of that stuff. But they're also it's a cool thing that this talk was not just about you, but Elon Musk. So that's that chain reaction. So through Ivy, it reaches these people, and maybe one person that comes out of this room, having listened to you, read the thing, you guys promote, it's like a chain reaction. So did you ever find a correlation?
Yeah, no, I've thought a lot about this. I think it's fascinating. And I've actually talked to Elon about this exact topic, because he's from South Africa, and he moved to Canada, and then he moved here. So he is a great person to actually assess kind of the differences. And the first thing to think about is the fact that what you're saying makes sense that America would be different, because think about what America, it's a strange place. Everyone in these other places, everyone kind of looks the same, or most people, because it's like where they were like 20,000 years ago, and they're still there, basically. And that's just the situation there. And they're eating, if you look at the cuisines, it's probably the food that naturally grows there, or the food that like some explorer brought over like 500 years ago. It's like what it is for a very obvious reason, right? America is a mess. It's all people from all these peoples just all come together with all the different cuisines and all the different cultures and everything. And basically no one culture holds because there's all these different ones. So what ends up happening is it's kind of a first principles country. It was a clean slate country. And it's almost like conventional wisdom doesn't hold as easily here, because every immigration movement comes with their own conventional wisdom, and they all clash with each other, and we end up with just nothing. And so like, well, let's just build stuff and like explore and like be rad. And I feel like that's literally kind of the beginning. And what we're free of here is what Elon calls the tall poppy syndrome. It's like it's a term that people use to describe the culture in what Elon says literally is basically every country other than the US, which is that, there's a field of poppies, and the tall one, no one likes the tall one, it gets cut. They get cut right down. In other words, you're not liked more by, you're not a popular figure if you're doing better than everyone else. People don't like you, they want to shoot you down, and if you are doing something, you don't talk about it. Do not mention it. Pretend that you're doing badly, And in America, it's a totally different culture. People are like, oh, good for this person. If people see someone like Elon, they're like, hey, wow, like what an awesome dude. Let's try to be like him. If someone does well, people are like they admire the person. And it's not seen as like this ugly thing. And that's this amazing luxury that we all have. We're free. So basically, it's that what it boils down to is it's hard for everyone to be a chef because our wiring tells us not to be. But we're free of a major obstacle to being a chef that other countries were not, which is the society being like basically encouraging you to be cooks at all costs and really punishing kind of like openly chef-like behavior too much. And in the US, we don't have that. We should we have an easier shot than most. We really do. And so we should try to, we should least, that should inspire us to say, okay, and Elon also mentioned that who's here? It's a nation of explorers. Every one of you, if you live here, either you're kind of pretty bold that you moved here from some other country, or your parents are, or your grandparents, someone was bold as shit to come here in the first place. If you're not bold, you don't come. You just stay where you are. You know how incredibly difficult it is to leave your country, to leave everyone you know and go to a new place where you're basically sacrificing your life for that's a bold person. It's a nation of explorers that came here in the first place, by definition. So it's a very special place, and it's a place that we have no excuse to be cooks because we have an easier time than everyone. So, yeah. Thank you.